Hi, I'm Matthias Worch. I'm the design director on Mafia 3 at Hangar 13.
The last time we saw the game was at Gamescom. What's changed in the last almost year since we last saw it?
We've gone in and we've actually executed on all of the promises that we presented at that point. So I think at Gamescom we already showed people the promise of a fully open world of crime rackets that are bleeding into the streets, of like individual backyards that we can take over and to damage Sal Marcano, who's the guy that we're ultimately going after. We gave you a little bit of a glimpse of that. We also then went into the Cistern, which was one of the drug dens or one of the hideouts. We've pretty much gone and we've actually executed on that promise across the entire game. So the video we showed today shows that a little bit. We're actually back in the French Ward in that one. We're showing some of the other rackets that we can go after. But yeah, we just worked very hard on making sure that there is a really good mixture between the actual narrative, the story, the actual missions that anchor that. We're showing the Steamboat today as like one of those big story moments where everything comes together. But then making sure before you get there, because it is a true open world game where you get to do whatever you want, you get to attack and damage Marcano whichever way you want to. There are a lot of things to do, and as you go into the city, you feel like, okay, man, it's pretty much limitless.
Is that how the game is structured then? You go about kind of bringing down these different rackets and then it all culminates in a kind of big set piece? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, ultimately we are trying to go after these 9 lieutenants, or lieutenants are actually capos in Sal Marcano's family. So Sal Marcano is the big crime boss in New Bordeaux. And ultimately we're trying to get to him, but this is something that Lincoln actually says in the story early on. If he just wanted to go after Marcano, he could just put on some face paint and get a sniper rifle and snipe him. That's not really what he's trying to do. He's actually trying to systematically dismantle Marcano and take away everything that he owns and then make it his own. So ultimately there are 9 either capos or people who are kicking up to those capos, and the districts that we actually have 10 districts, because there's the Bayou as well that you can go to and pretty much explore a lot. But there are 9 actual districts which are all run, and this is very similar to the way that the Mafia actually works, right? It's pretty much this pyramid that you're slowly working your way up to. So if we are going after Lou, like Uncle Lou, who is Marcano's brother, there's been a lot that happened before we even did that. We needed to recruit our spoke characters, like we're calling them spoke characters, actually our underbosses, Cassandra, Burke, and Vito, so they can help us take down the Empire. We've gone after this other guy, Tony, who we've talked about before, who is kicking up to Lou, and that's actually putting Lou in hot water, and then we can finally go after Lou. And if we get him to the point where he has to make a mistake and to slip up, then yes, we get a big story mission that then kind of everything culminates in.
And we saw as well that each district kind of has its own kind of business, like one will deal in heroin, another in PCP, smack. Does that change the nature of the missions from district to district? Or are they all quite similar?
Yeah, so every district does have this crime ecology, and there are multiple crimes, usually 2 that we're actually modeling in there. The way that then those rackets are bleeding into the street change the way that, they very heavily contextualize of what's actually happening on the street. So we put a lot of work into making sure that if you do witness a drug deal, it actually looks like a drug deal. If you do go after people cooking PCP, that's that. We've shown the Southern Union, who are operating up in Frisco Field. Don't want to give away their racket, but that's something that's like very unique to that as well. So it's this mixture of, on the one hand, where we want to make sure that as you're playing the open world, you feel like you can play intentionally, you feel like you know how to damage these guys. We don't want to create just a Simon says do this, this, and this, and you feel you're just following along objectives. So we want to create a feeling where you actually feel like you're actively dismantling it. And because of that, we're trying to add some order to the way you go after guys. So we have various types of activities. You might be going after one of the enforcers, and there might be a pimp, there might be a drug dealer, and so on. These are guys who are then kicking up to the lieutenant or capo in that district. We might have informants who are giving you much more information and insight into that crime racket, which then unlocks like a big damage objective. So we want to make sure on the one hand you can actually feel like, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this, while on the other hand trying to keep it fresh and making it feel like not every district feels the same.
And obviously we saw from the demo now that it's very brutal, there's a lot of very mature kind of subject matter in there. Was there a certain way you felt you had to approach that subject matter?
Well, in a way we are showing it as it is, in that Lincoln has very strong motivation, and we're establishing at the beginning of the game there's no love lost for him against the guys he's going up against. On the other hand, yes, the 60s being such a turbulent time, very much being a time when America changed like dramatically, right? The political and social undercurrents, like everything kind of kept coming up, and people like America lost its innocence. This actually does apply to the way that the Mafia operated in America as well at that point. The things did become much more brutal. They became much less about like this honor code and just people assuming that the Italian mob, well, you know what, they're not really doing anything bad over there, we can ignore that. So that's certainly part of it. The actual play style that you want to go with, and whether you want to do these brutal takedowns or you want to actually take down people non-lethally, is something that we're giving the player an option of. In these kind of demos, we're generally playing it in the more exciting way of doing it, but there actually is a way to do only non-lethal takedowns as well.
How would that work going non-lethal? Obviously you have to kill the guy at the top of the tree, right? You can't non-lethally take him down, can you?
Yeah, it's very much about, so Lincoln's story doesn't change about that. We're talking about, and you know, if you're shooting at people, you make that decision, then that's what you'll have to do. But if you want to sneak through the game, like we have actually like players who've completely stalked the entire game up to the crime bosses, you can do that. When it comes to the actual guys on the top, yes, that's where Lincoln has a very specific way in which you're going to deal with them.
Right. How about the reinforcements that come in? Obviously, if you've kind of rung the alarm bell, that's it for stealth, right? Once kind of Marcano's reinforcements are there.
Yeah, so once reinforcements come in, you'll have to start shooting at people. But at this point, you probably tried to stalk and something happened. So there's an extra mechanic. That's one of the nice things about doing something in the 60s and that no cell phones, right? Like the only way that people can actually call the cops, but also reinforcements, is to actually run to a phone. So there are various ways in which we're actually making it possible to manage this kind of situations. One of these sentries has actually run to a phone. You chose to not go after him immediately. We actually give you tools to identify the guy who's going to run to the phone. While he's running to the phone, you can go after him as well. And then once the reinforcements comes in, yes, then things have kind of gone sideways, and now we have to, well, we give you various tools to then deal with that. We also have associates. We showed some of them today, right? Like we have the mobile store, that's an associate, and then Vito lends us his muscle. There are other associates, like this one comes from Cassandra, for example, where you can get an in with the phone company and the dispatcher. So if you want to bribe somebody to keep all of the calls from going out, you can do that. So while one of these guys is running to the phone, you could actually make a call of your own and bribe somebody, say, you know what, make sure that call doesn't actually go out. Yeah. So that's a way in which you can go in power, and as you're building your own mafia, like your crime family, you can start undermining the systems and can use that to your advantage.
We also saw as well that when you're dividing up the turf, you can cause arguments among your underbosses. We actually saw Burke becoming an enemy. What happens in that scenario after you've dealt with Burke? Can you recruit a new underboss, or have you effectively kind of weakened your own operation?
It's a choice you made, and yes, you'll have to deal with it. The main consequence that comes out of it is really having to deal with somebody betraying you. Now, what we showed today, for one, yes, that was very unique to this specific playthrough, where there might other people, you can keep everybody happy. You might actually lose more than one of these of your own underbosses as well. And we're trying to entice the player in many ways to actually cause these kind of arguments, because these are all hardened criminals. There's no love lost between them. They're going to try to give you the best support, the best rewards to make sure they're getting all the turf. So we're actually trying to, seed some discontent there. Yeah. Once one of these three underbosses is gone, they actually have lieutenants themselves who then start running the business, but we're not adding an additional guy to the crime tree. It's like when one of those guys is gone, they're not going to show up at those sit-downs anymore, and then the other two guys are very much going to comment on that. And it's probably going to put them a little bit more in line as well, because they can see what happened.
Sure. Is there a scenario where you can end up losing all of your underbosses? Is that possible?
you need at least one of them to run the city for you. So if you get to the point where only one of them is alive, which is like I see people do that all the time, it's very interesting to see like people are trying to keep everybody happy or they don't really care and they're only trying to keep one of them alive. It's very strong. Like I mean, they're pretty much pledging their allegiance at this point. But you've also made such a strong like push and such a strong investment in them that they're going to be the people who are running the city with you. And that's then going to be reflected in the endings as well.
Talking about the time period again a little bit, how kind of a bigger undertaking was it to get all the research and make sure everything was authentic? Were there any times when you took concessions and maybe kind of fiddled with things a little bit?
I think it's pretty authentic. I mean, it's just so much fun to like kind of just dig into it. Like I'm from Germany, right? Growing up in Germany, it was actually interesting to me how much I knew about the 60s in America. Because there's so many world events that ultimately affected. So between Vietnam and assassinations and the moon landing and so on, there wasn't really much where we tried to make specific concessions to that, which goes all the way to Donovan actually giving you various toys and various tools that you can use during your quest. A lot of it is based on what the CIA was actually doing at that point. The way you are able to call in your own reinforcements is based on field telephones that you had at that point. So there might be here or there where we're bending things a little bit, but it's not to the point where I could even point to one initially. I think there might have been one or two songs which we wanted to include. They might actually come out, I think we said like in late 68, there might be a song that came out early, like actually came out a little bit after when it's actually played, but it's such a cool song, you want to have it in there. But beyond that, it's just, there's so much material there. We didn't really have to do much.
And you mentioned events like the moon landing. Do you get a sense of those things happening? Do you get it like through radio broadcasts, TV things, anything like that in the game?
Yeah, there are people commenting on it. You actually see it in various cutscenes. You see like as Lincoln is recuperating, you're seeing various events playing out on the television right there. And then you really have people in the streets very much commenting on it and having their own opinion on it and the way it affects them. You see a lot just in the visual storytelling in the city, like communism and the fear of that was a big deal. So you're going to see posters from both sides of the argument on in the streets. Like you're going to see protests against the Vietnam War. You're going to see that being broken up. You're going to see registration booths for black voters and those kind of things.
What's your single favorite part of the game? Maybe something you haven't mentioned yet or something we saw today, anything you like?
I really like, and so we showed one specific version here, but I really like seeing my choices play out over the entire game. Because that feels like you feel like you're part of the story. There is a really strong story that everybody's going to experience. At the same time, you feel like you can really find yourself in the story. So being able to play through the game several times and having an opinion and even talking to people on the dev team who've only played the game once and talking about the different experience they had and, oh, I kept Cassandra alive, and then you finally see that cutscene. We have like 3 hours of cutscenes in the game. I've seen all of them at this point, but there's so much to discover, and some of it is actually just the fact that, you know, some of them are conditional, some of them are very much reactive to the choices you made. So feeling like when you're done with the game, it really wasn't just a story somebody told you, but it was your story, but it was really well told and you find yourself in it. I think that's really cool. And then actually like there are cutscenes when you have to take down the people who betrayed you. There's some pretty heartbreaking moments in there.
I can imagine. Are there different endings as well then in that case?
Yeah, there are ways in which you find yourself in those endings, depending on who's alive in the end, exactly what you've done. The fates of various characters that we meet through the story are going to be represented in the ending that you get. So Mafia 3 is coming out on October 7 for Xbox One, PlayStation 4 and PC.